There have been spikes in avocado and macadamia nut thefts in recent months. This comes after high demand for the items on the black market. Now, farming associations say syndicates are increasingly offering stolen produce in legitimate markets. February and March are particularly vulnerable periods for both avocado and macadamia theft here in South Africa. Julia Stanyard from the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime joining us now from Geneva to discuss this further. Julia, good evening and thanks so much for your time. Now, many of us have not heard of a black market of this kind. Please give us some details. Where and how is it operating?
So yeah, as you say, it's not something that you naturally expect to be a target for organised crime, but we've heard that the black market in these goods has really increased in the recent years because the market has really surged and prices have risen. So particularly for avocados, this is supposed to be the worst time of year for this crime because harvesting of the fruit has not yet begun, begins in March. So there's pre-season scarcity and prices are very high. Reportedly, the northern parts of South Africa are worst hit at this time of year because the avocados are more mature in those regions. So growers really are most targeted in those regions at the moment.
So, I mean, I'm looking at some information here in front of me, Julia, and I'm looking at terms like organized crime, corruption, and even violence. So, you know, what's exactly happening when it comes to the crime part of this?
Yeah, so one of the issues with both avocados and macadamias that we found is that these products are being brought to legitimate markets. So for avocados, we were told that the majority of stolen fruits ends up on informal roadside markets, but actually a proportion also goes on to organised, what you'd expect to be more legitimate markets in these towns. So that these are market traders who are buying these fruits outside of the market where inspections don't happen, and then they are bringing them to the market as though they're kind of legitimately grown and legitimately bought. And same for macadamias, we were actually told that stolen produce is going on to international supply chains and then being sold outside of South Africa.
So could we actually be seeing this in our supermarkets, our local fruit and veg stores? Are we seeing illegal produce being sold there? And where's the chain of supply? I mean, who's keeping an eye on that?
Well, it's obviously very difficult to say because once stolen produce enters the legitimate market, it's very difficult to tell the difference between the two. For macadamias, for example, produce can be stockpiled for a very long time, and it looks functionally exactly the same. So once it's infiltrated, it's very difficult to track. But essentially, some of the stolen produce does, as I say, go onto legitimate markets. There are inspectors at markets, of course, and they've seen trends in theft increase in the last few years. Avocado markets, for example, they're much more vigilant, we've been told, and that's actually helped to reduce the thefts a bit. But as you say, infiltrating onto the legitimate market makes it difficult to differentiate.
Julia, what would you say to anyone out there who might be thinking now as they listen to us chatting that, fine, there are a couple of people out there stealing some avos, stealing some macadamia nuts, people are trying to make a living. Who's getting hurt in this process?
Yeah, well, exactly. But some of the implications of the thefts are actually really far-reaching. Like the impact on the growers is not just the costs of the thefts themselves, but the costs of increasing security on their farms, for example, can be really overwhelming for growers, particularly smallholder growers. They don't have the resources available to install a lot of different kinds of security. And realistically, if you're buying stolen produce, you are actually getting a lesser product, really. For avocados, we're often told that the stolen fruit is generally immature. It'll never ripen properly, so it'll never really be good to eat. And the same for macadamias, that stolen nuts are never processed in the way that's, in accordance with safety standards, etc. So there's risks there, and the actual produce that you're buying is of lesser quality.
So how much of this is actually affecting South Africa?
So it's not only South Africa, but it's also, as we've seen, like regional and global as well. So while we've seen a lot of reports of avocado and macadamia theft within South Africa, macadamia theft is also reported in Zimbabwe, where it's become violent there. There are armed groups armed with machetes stealing macadamias at some stages. And then for avocados, the trend is actually global, and we've seen a lot of violence surrounding avocado markets in Mexico. There've also been reports from New Zealand about farmers having to increase security there. So while it is a South African phenomenon, it's by no means just South Africa.
So what do we do about it?
So we spoke to avocado growers associations and macadamia growers associations about this, and the avocado growers in South Africa told us that actually they've seen a slight decrease in thefts over the last couple of seasons. They've been working with the police a lot more over cases of theft, but they've also been more vigilant on inspections at markets to try and ensure that there's supply chain integrity, to make sure that no stolen fruit is coming onto the market. So there are different ways of people being more vigilant, both in the market themselves and law enforcement as well.
Thanks very much for that, Julia. Who would have thought that things like avocados and macadamia nuts would be leading to crime on this level, Jamie?
It's interesting, Yuveka, and also worth looking at the economics of avocado pears. I'm looking at Business Insider South Africa at Woolworths right now. If you can find them. Yeah. Two-pack of ripe avocados are going to set you back 54.99. Let's call it 55 rand. Pick and Pay 50 rand. A far cry from the prices in March last year, where you could get an avo, or though it wasn't ripe and ready, at ShopRite. Want to guess? 7 rand an avocado pear.
Wow.
So who would have thought we'd be discussing the economics of avocado pears?
I know.
But nonetheless, it
and
is
the crime attached to avocado
problem.
pears also. It is a serious problem.
All right, let's move on.